Okay, so today we're diving into a world we don't often get a glimpse into.
Prison life, yeah.
Okay.
More specifically, we're going to be exploring the use of steroids behind bars,
Right.
and we're going to be doing it all through the lens of this former inmate, Darren Gee.
Yeah.
We've got his story captured in a YouTube video transcript,
Wow.
which is pretty cool. It's a different source for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're right, this is like raw, firsthand experience, not just statistics.
Exactly.
Hearing someone describe their reality, especially in a place like prison,
Right.
can really change how we understand an issue.
Totally. It's one thing to know, like, okay, steroids exist in prisons, but to hear someone describe it, it just hits differently.
Absolutely.
So Darren was in HMP Lancaster Farms, and right off the bat, he talks about this pressure to use steroids.
Right.
Like, it's almost like the air you breathe in there.
Yes, and that's a crucial point. Before we even get into like Darren's personal experience,
Okay.
we need to understand the prison environment.
Yeah.
It can be a very tough, even dangerous place.
Right.
And physical strength becomes a form of currency.
Right. It's not even just about vanity at that point. It's about survival in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in that high-pressure setting where your safety, your status
Right.
can be linked to how physically imposing you are,
Yeah.
the idea of using something like steroids
Right.
to level the playing field or even gain an advantage
Right.
becomes, understandable.
It makes a lot of sense in that context.
Yeah.
And Darren actually describes seeing guys who are absolutely huge, like
Wow.
19, 20 stone, which for our listener is like roughly 260 to 280 pounds.
Wow.
It really paints this picture of how important size and strength are in that world.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is how Darren, despite initially being opposed to steroids,
Okay.
gets drawn into this culture.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of a classic story, almost like peer pressure, but with way higher stakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Way higher.
He talks about this guy, Tommy Gildo,
Okay.
who basically warned him off steroids years before.
Wow.
It seems like it was actually like solid advice at the time that he really took to heart,
Right.
at least for a while.
Yeah, it shows the impact a single person's words can have, especially when you're younger. But it also highlights how powerful the forces at play in prison are.
Right.
That even with this kind of warning, it can be so easy to be swayed.
It makes you wonder if someone's already like on edge, maybe even scared.
Right. Yeah.
How much harder is it to resist that kind of pressure?
Absolutely.
Because Darren does eventually give in, right?
Right.
He talks about this other inmate, Pat Moe,
Okay.
almost convincing him to try steroids,
Okay.
making it seem casual, like sharing a cigarette or something.
And that casual attitude is really concerning.
Totally. Yeah.
He even talks about splitting the doses to make them last longer,
Really?
which indicates a level of planning,
Wow.
perhaps even a system of distribution within the prison.
Wow, I didn't even think about it like that. It's
Yeah.
not just like a few guys doing this on the sly. It feels more ingrained in the culture, like you said before.
Precisely. And this normalization of steroid use
Right.
is a big part of what makes it so dangerous,
Yeah,
especially for someone new to that environment.
totally. And the thing is, Darren has a really intense reaction to the steroids.
Right.
It's not just about like getting bigger.
Right.
It's like his whole system gets thrown out of whack.
Oh, wow.
He talks about this like overwhelming libido,
Right.
even comparing himself to a Viagra.
Wow. It's a pretty vivid description.
Yeah.
And it highlights a crucial point.
Right.
Steroid use isn't just about muscle growth.
Right.
It has profound effects on your hormones.
Right.
And in Darren's case,
Yeah.
it sounds like his testosterone levels were sent into overdrive.
That makes sense because he even talks about needing to lock off and abuse myself, which I'm guessing means,
Right.
well, let's just say it sounds like the steroids were making it hard for him to control his impulses.
Exactly. And that's a really important point for our listener.
Right.
Steroids can have a huge impact on your mood and your behavior.
Okay.
We're talking about increased aggression,
Yeah.
impulsivity, even paranoia in some cases.
So it's not just a physical risk.
Right.
It's a mental and emotional one, too.
Absolutely. And for someone in an environment like prison,
Right.
where tensions are already high
Yeah.
and violence is always a possibility,
Right.
these kinds of side effects can be incredibly dangerous.
It's like adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly.
And for Darren, it sounds like this is where the reality of what he's doing really hits him. He even says he felt like he'd end up life off, which I learned means getting a life sentence
Why?
if he stayed on steroids.
That's a really powerful realization.
Yeah.
And it seems like that fear that he was putting his entire future at risk
Right.
was enough to make him stop using.
It's almost like he needed that wake-up call.
Yeah.
That stark reminder of the consequences.
Right.
And what's interesting is that he never goes back.
Right.
You'd think, with the pressure in that environment,
Right, yeah.
he'd be tempted again, but he just shuts it down.
It does suggest a certain inner strength, a willingness to walk away from something,
Right.
even when it's all around you.
Yeah.
But it's also important to note that not everyone has that kind of resilience.
That's very true. Yeah.
For some, the pressure and the perceived benefits
Right.
outweigh the risks.
Yeah, it's easy for us to say, like, just walk away.
Right.
But we're not living in that world with those pressures.
Exactly.
But what I found really interesting was how Darren doesn't just drop the topic.
Okay.
He goes on this whole rant about how people who use steroids are weak and cheaters.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
It's not just about the physical dangers of steroids anymore.
Right.
It's about what they represent.
Like he's judging their character at that point.
Precisely.
Not even just their actions.
And for Darren, it seems to come down to this idea of authenticity,
Okay.
of earning your strength and your physique
Yeah.
through hard work and dedication,
Right.
not shortcuts.
Right.
He sees steroids as a betrayal of that,
Right.
a sign of weakness and a lack of willpower.
Which is kind of ironic considering he used them himself.
Exactly.
Even if it was just for a short time.
It is, and it speaks to the complex relationship people have with steroids.
Yeah.
It's not always black and white.
Yeah.
There can be a lot of guilt, shame,
Right.
even self-loathing associated with using them,
Right.
which is part of what makes Darren's story so compelling.
And it takes another turn.
Yeah.
He goes on this whole tangent about testosterone.
Okay.
He's talking about how men are given a certain amount
Yeah.
and how they waste it throughout their
It's
lives.
a very creative interpretation of testosterone and its role.
Yeah.
But it speaks to the fascination, almost an obsession,
Right.
that surrounds testosterone,
Yeah.
particularly among men.
Right.
It's often seen as the source of masculinity, of drive, of vitality. And in a way, Darren seems to be suggesting that steroid use is an attempt to recapture that,
Okay.
to regain something that's been lost or squandered.
It's like we've got this power inside us, this testosterone, but instead of like using it wisely,
Yeah.
we just let it slip away.
Right.
And then we turn to things like steroids to try to get it back.
It's a fascinating perspective.
Yeah.
And it touches on something I think really interesting
Okay.
about the way we view masculinity and strength.
Okay.
It's almost as if he's suggesting that men should be these like
Right.
superhuman figures capable of controlling and harnessing their
Right.
testosterone
Right.
with like perfect discipline.
Which, let's be honest, is a pretty unrealistic expectation.
Exactly. And it highlights the pressure
Yeah.
that many men feel to live up to these idealized notions
Right.
of strength and masculinity,
Right.
which can be incredibly damaging.
It's like that pressure cooker environment inside prison,
Exactly.
where those expectations are like magnified even further.
Precisely. It's a perfect storm.
Yeah.
You have this hyper-masculine environment
Right.
combined with easy access to steroids.
Right.
And this underlying pressure to be the biggest, strongest version of yourself.
Yeah.
It's no wonder that someone like Darren,
Right.
even with his reservations, gets caught up in it.
It really makes you think about the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
If steroid use is this prevalent in a place where it's supposedly like banned
Right.
and tightly controlled,
Yeah.
what does that tell us about the outside world?
It raises some serious questions.
Oh, yeah.
It suggests that simply banning substances or trying to control them through force isn't enough.
Right.
We need to understand the underlying reasons why people use them.
Right.
The pressures they're facing, the
Yeah.
messages they're receiving about what it means to be strong and successful.
So it's not just about stopping people from using steroids.
Right.
It's about changing the culture that makes them feel like they need to in the first place.
Exactly.
Wow. This has been
Quite a journey. We went from a YouTube video about one guy's experience
yeah.
to this whole conversation about masculinity and societal pressures.
Right.
It really shows you the power of a deep dive, huh?
Absolutely. And it reminds us that even in the most unexpected places,
Yeah.
we can find insights that challenge our assumptions
Right.
and make us see the world in a new light.
So to our listener,
We leave you with this. What pressures do you face in your own life?
and how do you navigate those pressures in a way that feels true to you? Food for thought.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.